Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome back to another Stuffed Alpaca reaction. And man, it's been a while since I've watched some of their stuff. So yeah, this is Darkners and Reality, Deltarune Theories and Analysis. And man, with a title like that, the only thing I can really think of with a title like that is the, oh god, what was it? That one video I reacted to from Jaru, talking about how, like, the theorizing that, like, the darkness from Dark Fountains and Darkners were created from, like, injuring the Earth's soul or something like that. I mean, it was a really weird theory. But yeah, that's, like, Darkners and Reality, again, that's a very vague, you know, title. And when I look in the description, literally the only thing in the description is all music by Toby Fox, so that really doesn't help me, like, at all. So, I mean, really don't have anything else to say on this, so, you know, let's get this video started. So, yeah, of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video will lead to my Let's Play of the day. And if you like this video or any other video that I make, I'd very much appreciate it if you gave the video a like and subscribe to my channel, because my main goal for this year is to hopefully hit 5,000 subscribers, and at the current rate I'm going, that is totally doable. And once again, it's all thanks to every single one of you that actually subscribes to my channel because they think I'm worth it. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
After months of repeating the mantra like a prayer, it is truly Deltarune tomorrow. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, 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 tomorrow. Delta soon it will be Delta June, and we'll be listening to some Delta tunes.
Yeah, it's Deltarune is not yet tomorrow, but it's several tomorrows away.
I haven't made a proper video essay about Deltarune in over half a year because I ran out of ideas for them, but pretty soon I'm gonna have a lot to talk about. Probably too much considering how long I take to edit videos. Among other things, it can be really tedious to come up with a different visual for every single sentence I say, so I made a rent Sona.
I mean, it works. I mean, you can only get, like, so much new and dedicated, you know, like, background filler scenes to, you know, fill out time and space. So, I mean, like, at the end of the day, why not have somebody to literally look at and talk to? Or watch, I should really say.
Ventriloquisona, if you will. There's something interesting about the beginning of the Deltarune trailer, where Chris approaches Susie, downcast and alone, and takes her hand in a gesture of friendship, and it's so cute, you guys, and then Rousey appears and just walks with them. When I first watched this, I was expecting him to, like, take off his hat. You wouldn't even need a unique animation for that, but
yeah, they already
he doesn't
did
do anything, and it's a weird contrast to Chris and Susie, like, he's just there. Other people also pointed this out, a la bro thinks he's on the team, and the general consensus seemed to be, well, duh, Chris doesn't care about him, which is complicated. This isn't something that needs to be read into, that's what the actual game is for. The average person watching the Nintendo Direct who hasn't thought about Deltarune in a while is just supposed to go, whoa, it's Rousey, I remember Rousey, but it got me thinking regardless about the broader attitude towards Rousey and Darkners in general. The game largely takes place in the Dark Worlds, but I find that fan content heavily prefers Lightner characters, which is understandable. 3 out of 4 of our main characters are Lightners. Individual Darkners besides Rousey are largely only going to be present in one chapter, and they're not as real as Lightners, are they? They're objects, they're representations of fiction and escapism, their characters just aren't as deep.
Well, I'm trying to think of that. I think I remember watching, I remember in one of the videos I reacted to a while ago, I can't remember which one, but I think they were talking about how Toby specifically said that, you know, only, I think it was like only Darkners were actually going to get, like, plushes and toys and stuff like that. Like, no Lightner characters would get a plush like, you know, Chris, Susie, Noelle, which, I mean, God, you know, a Noelle plush would just sell like absolute hotcakes. But I think if I remember correctly from the video, or at least what I remember of it, they were talking about how, you know, that whole thing about, oh, only the Darkners themselves actually get merch can kind of comes from the fact that even in universe, they're kind of there to bring joy to others. So, I mean, I could also see that being another reason why, you know, fan media is so much more about the Lightners, because when it comes to stuff that you can buy and interact with, like in real life with the Lightners, there's basically nothing. So you have to make up for that with, like, fan content.
Which isn't to say people don't enjoy Darkner characters, but they definitely don't receive anywhere near the same kind of attention, excluding the unique cases of the secret bosses and obviously Ralsei, who is a whole beast of his own.
Yeah.
I don't think the attitude towards Darkners is unfounded, but it is kind of ironic. Spamton and Jevil are analyzed so heavily because their characters explore the existentialism of being a fictional character and are integral to Deltarune's themes. They both represent reactions to being told you and your choices don't matter. We understand how messed up the Darkner-Lightner player hierarchy is, but I think we simultaneously enforce that hierarchy by not giving other Darkners, ones with heavy screen time at that, much time of day. These guys are kind of the thematic core of the game, and I think they're due for some deeper examination if we want to understand the story's direction. A big part of why Darkners feel flatter than Lightners is that, being from fantastical settings, they have these very defined roles in their worlds that can easily summarize their characters. Queen is a queen, Swatch is her butler, Rules is a minion, Ralsei is our guide, and they
perpetually a minion. He tries to be like anybody's minion, seemingly.
Embody these things caricaturishly. Our Lightner characters don't have these set roles, they're like high school students. But the thing is,
literally.
Darkners aren't their roles. They don't perfectly perform them by nature. All of them are self-aware that they exist to serve Lightners and thus consciously work to perform their roles, and some of them have very different ideas of how to do that. This is why the Card Castle enemies, rather than supporting their tyrannical king because that's who they are playing that part to make ends meet. The more I've thought about it, the more I've realized that not just a few, but a lot of the major Darkner characters serve as heavy commentary on what it means to have a preordained role. I will zero in on Ralsei later, but as an appetizer, why don't we start by talking about the least important guy?
Yeah, of course.
Many people will roll their eyes at the suggestion that this guy will ever have anything more going on with him than being a joke, but him being a joke is actually important to the discussion here. Something I've been thinking about recently is the weird relationship Rules has with his purpose compared to other Darkners. Your typical Darkner enemy fights you because they're under orders to by their ruler / an actual mind slave. King opposes you because he felt abandoned by the Lightners and without a purpose, so he found a new one in the night and wants to keep his fountain running and get revenge on Lightners. Like King, Queen also wants to cover the world in darkness, but she's doing it out of a desire to serve the Lightners.
Yeah, though, again, with her, like, so, the exact order of operations here is a bit up in the air, but, you know, like, Dark Fountain opened, she lost connection to the internet, went mad because of it, and then thought, hey, because so many Lightners look up sad requests on the internet, I'm going to help them, since, you know, the Dark World is supposed to be, you know, joy and stuff for the Lightners, we'll just bring all of them in, whether they want to or not.
And Rules doesn't seem to have any strong feelings towards Lightners either way, but he's also super willing to serve King or Queen just on the basis of them being evil.
Yeah.
He also might have a thing for Queen now, but as much as I do like that as a ship, I'm not sure he knows who she is, which just hammers in the performativity of his whole shtick.
You know, something I just thought of. So, you know, I mean, like, everybody knows about, like, Rules' super annoying speech patterns where, you know, he puts thuz on the ends of, you know, so many words, like a really bad impersonation of, like, say, Shakespearean English or something like that. But I just thought, what if he has a speech impediment? Like, what if all this time, yeah, he puts all the thuz randomly on words because he speaks with, like, a lisp or something. Or, like, the equivalent to a lisp. I mean, you look at him and literally, again, he has that sort of thing where, like, his upper and lower jaws are kind of sort of melted together or something like that. It's really weird. Or the only time that ever proves that, you know, he doesn't speak with, like, the thuz is... are, like, the times when you beat his super simple puzzles where he's like, God damn it, and then he runs away or something. So the one thing that makes me think of is, like, with Samuel L. Jackson, where he says his he says his punchline. I don't actually want to say it.
I have had it with these monkey fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane.
But, like, if I remember correctly from, like, a story I read, the reason he started saying that so often was to help himself get over a stutter. So maybe that's quite literally the reason why, you know, Rules doesn't do, like, it doesn't say everything like this all the time, is because it literally is a speech impediment, and the only time he stops talking like that is through, like, is like through like moments of extreme emotion.
And this is a fun, silly motivation for a fun, silly villain, but it's so transparently meaningless, I think it stands out in a discussion of Darkners and purpose.
Yeah,
Most
very
characters
much so.
are really happy being in Castletown, but Rules tags along to the cyberworld uninvited in search of a rebound. It's like he's refusing to let go of his evil minion trope and just can't accept that he's not relevant anymore, and him getting petrified mid-attack is meant to remind him of his role. Even so, he does manage for a time to intrude on our adventure, and I think it's interesting that he's able to persist unstatuified for so much longer than Lancer. Like, he left our inventory as soon as we got here, and he's still kicking way after Lancer isn't. And that seems to be because his pirate gimmick is a pun on software pirating, thus making him belong more to the cyberworld.
Oh my god, how did I never notice that before? Honestly, like, I never really gave that much thought as to why he was dressed like a pirate. I mean, I always just assumed it was more just, oh, you know, they're on a river or like a body of quote-unquote water, and so like, what's a criminal or a bad guy that's on the water and stuff like that? It's like, oh, you know, pirate. Having him literally represent or trying to represent software piracy, I mean... Oh god, that's beautiful, really.
Until he leaves the ship. Still, it's notable that he was able to stretch the rules at all, and we have dialogue from the summer newsletter confirming that he and Lancer will be returning to Chapter 3's Dark World, although apparently they're just hereth for the snacks.
I mean, I was going to say, like, how much you want to bet that literally, like, rules just appears in your inventory, you don't even see him enter it, you just open your inventory, like, when you're in the light world, and you just see him there.
Personally, I also think he's the one who stole the Shadow Mantle just based on vibes. Whether anything's actually going to happen with him or not,
Really?
There's definitely some potential setup with this guy. I wonder if his relationship with Lancer will be explored anymore, because he is Lancer's only non-abusive, non-imprisoned parental figure, besides Queen, who only adopts him if every enemy is recruited. But he's hardly the dad that stepped up, he's tsundere about it, and he's got other priorities.
Yeah, I mean, he's specifically called Lancer's lesser dad.
So I wonder if we'll see him embrace that more. Speaking of Lancer's actual dad... Writing unlikable characters isn't something Toby Fox does a whole lot. Most people in these games have arcs where they improve as people, and they're usually pretty likable even before that. You might personally hate Alphys, but that isn't because she was written to be unlikable, you just have bad taste. But since King is a vessel for Chapter 1's message of needing to fight sometimes, he has to be someone who can't be spared. So he ends up being portrayed as a very serious and cruel person, and he's not allowed to be funny until after he's disarmed. Wholly serious characters don't jive with Deltarune's tone super well though, so he's reserved to the end of the chapter, unlike the very involved Queen. He performs the role of the bad guy to a T, and because he refuses to be redeemed, he just ends up in jail, which is a first for a Toby Fox antagonist. He's a really unusual case.
Actually, yeah, thinking about it, that's one of those things where you literally never see him until the end of the game. Like there isn't even like moments of where you see his silhouette or something. Like, you literally just see him when you go to fight him in the boss battle. I never thought of that before. Huh.
And he isn't without nuance or completely unsympathetic, but those aspects of him are hardly in your face. Like, his screen time is already so short, so his explanation of his motive is entirely reserved for battle dialogue when your attention is split between reading the text and actually playing the game. It's not hidden, the Darkners feeling abandoned is present in other places, but King's perspective feels pretty understated compared to any other character, and that's interesting. He thinks he's found a new purpose and can live without Lightners, but what he's actually done is reduced himself to a rigid one-note villain role, to the point of choosing to stay imprisoned rather than change. The tragedy here is that King is, or at least was, more than the villain he presents himself as. His Czech dialogue suggests that he didn't always have a heart cracked with hatred. We know that the night in the fountain had a negative influence on him, and most significantly, he does hold affection for Lancer and value his happiness. There is a person with more complicated feelings underneath his stone-faced image. Case in point, him threatening to kill Lancer was apparently a bluff, but of course that won't change that his actions weren't reflective of those feelings.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is like, oh, I still love my son. I mean, like, how many abusive parents have said that? I mean, at the end of the day, you still literally threatened to kill him.
And the way he adhered to his self-imposed role hurt his son. Lancer is one character who never actually held the belief that Darkners are supposed to serve Lightners since his dad hates them, and Ralsei's proselytizing of the idea seems to kind of bounce right off him, as he is a very bouncy boy.
Very
he does
bouncy,
absorb
yes.
his dad's bad guy shtick, however, likening Darkner's conformity to roles to a child's desire to impress their parent. Since Lancer is a child, he doesn't really get what a bad guy is, and is honestly just into it for the aesthetics, which is great because in the end, he's kind of the most free of all the Darkners once his father is dealt with. Despite not believing his value is derived from Lightners, his friendship with Susie is probably the best example of how the Dark World brings Lightners happiness.
Actually thinking about it, how old is Lancer even supposed to be? Because obviously, like, he's played off as being, like, very immature and not knowing much about the world. And yet, at the same time, like, he still makes good friends with Susie, who's, you know, a literal teenager in high school. So, there can't be that much of a difference between their apparent ages. Wonder if there's anything official about that. Because I know there's nothing official about the actual main characters' ages. Yeah, I'm seeing, like, looking through this and a couple of other things I've looked through, like, general opinion seems to be, like, ranging anywhere from, like, 8 to 10, which, I mean, yeah, I can very much see that. I mean, I was friends with a lot of kids a couple years younger than me for a while there, so, yeah.
His individuality and relatability to Susie is why he's able to connect with her in Chapter 1 while Ralsei struggles at first. Lancer also really likes Ralsei, which is really sweet and makes him one of 3 people to remember he exists.
Aww.
Lancer got a lot of appreciation in the 6th anniversary livestream, including perhaps the most supportive evidence of this video's entire thesis.
It's funny thinking all of the ideas I thought of 8 years ago, and how much things have changed. Lancer originally never became your friend. He was annoying like Pokey. Got thrown out the window but his dad for putting salsa in a lawnmower. But he grew on me, and now he's his own character with real emotions.
Salsa in a lawnmower. It's so weird.
Wow, it's almost like he's a person or something. He doesn't have the most complicated or subtle characterization in the world, but beyond his silliness, he is a genuinely lonely and neglected kid trying to work out how he feels about his father. He isn't a mere set piece in his relationship with Susie. His internal conflict about following his dad versus his new friends is what triggers Chapter 1's emotional climax. Chapter 2 does seem to, solidify that his importance in the story is largely over, but notably, he is the one to give the first nudge in reassuring Birdley that smarts aren't everything, thus triggering his heel turn. We know that Lancer will continue to join us in future Dark Worlds, but I also think that being Susie's best friend, he's going to come into play once certain bombshells like Chris being possessed and especially Darkners being objects get dropped on her. I think for a time, Susie will feel rather betrayed by Ralsei and possibly even Chris, but I can't see her rejecting Lancer for being less real in the end, if at all. Since Lancer is set up as being very innocent to his position as a Darkner, I think these reveals will impact him emotionally as well. I've even seen some people suggest
What do you mean I'm only a playing card?
just that Chapter 1's fountain is going to make a return, and that actually seems kind of likely. The very intricately decorated Great Door still stands in Castletown as a looming reminder of its existence, with the narration ominously saying that it may never open again instead of just saying it won't. Whether or not making more fountains or closing fountains is a good thing is obviously going to be a huge part of Deltarune's narrative, and a good way to touch on that might be if we could somehow explore the abandoned card kingdom. If anyone's going to subvert the format of Darkners being one-chapter wonders, I think it's gonna be Lancer. At the very least, he'll probably keep collecting dads. Queen was really beloved when Chapter 2 first came out, but it was mostly just as a meme. Which, fair, her humor is absolutely one of the best things about her. But that love seems to have dwindled a bit these days, and I find her other strengths to be really underappreciated. Just like Lancer, Queen isn't a static tool for Noelle's development and has an arc of her own, about learning that you can't operate exclusively on cold logic and assume you know how others feel. She's another character who comments on the performance of villainy. Her cruelty is done out of benevolence and not malice because she thinks she knows what will make everyone happy. Lightners love traffic, they look it up all the time. She's a pretty effective commentary.
Yeah, that's, it's kind of the problem with AIs, with right now. It's like, they take in, like, all this data and stuff like that, but they don't have any of the context for it.
on our relationship with technology, from how we depend on it so much for that steady stream of dopamine, of course she'd assume worshipping her is what people really need. Her straightforward rational thinking is due to her being a computer, smart, but unlike an unfeeling robot, she's able to grow beyond that thinking at the end of the chapter. In fact, even before that, her fixation on Noelle wasn't rational at all, but born of motherly affection, seeing Noelle as strong, sympathizing with her reliance on technology and search for her sister. In the end, she's even able to remember Birdley's name and will warn him when he's about to hurt his arm. Queen is at her best in Snowgrave. When Noelle returns to her in defeat, she doesn't take advantage of her and instead has her rest, giving up her mansion to Spampton in search of Birdley. We often see these glimpses of uncomputer-like emotion and doubt from Queen that she quickly covers up, like when she questions if her methods are actually bad and then backtracks to insisting she's always right.
God, yeah, those little... I mean, yeah, she's literally a laptop, but... Like, at the end of the day, she is still a mother. I mean, yeah, there was the whole theory about her being the, universal mother, which isn't quite true, but I mean, at the same time,
And she hides her disappointment at her people not being in Castletown in violent playthroughs, or the entire ending of the Snowgrave route where she gives up with a fake smile. She already contains bits of humanity that her role as an evil robot would seek to conceal, and she redeems herself by embracing that outside of her existence as an object. I can't really say Ralsei is an overlooked or underappreciated character. Look at the little scringly dingly. Look at the little plongy spongy. This disgusting yet popular animal will win us so much money. A different prevailing view of him, though, often held by less than casual Deltarune fans, is something to the effect of a bunch of ominous meta-narrative elements shambled together wearing a cotton candy trench coat. If you're sufficiently in the trenches, I probably don't have to tell you that Ralsei shows a clear bias towards pleasing the player and convincing us that our choices matter even if they contradict his values, that he's usually talking to us and not to Chris, who doesn't like him that much, that he enforces toxic positivity and blissful ignorance and avoids addressing any ominous aspects of the dark world until it's absolutely necessary. So...
Yeah, again, the whole thing, there were obviously going to be some major bombshells that drop later on, and I look forward to and dread seeing them actually, play out. And at the same time, there's a 90% chance that they're all going to revolve around Rousey in some shape or form.
Ralsei is sus, right? He knows things he shouldn't and won't tell us things that he should, and his background is vague and his face sprite is ugly. This is all true. But I think we're ignoring that some of the weirdest things about Ralsei aren't that unique to him. Ralsei knows the layout of the school, yes, but Queen knows she's in the library too. Shalm tells us how to pronounce their name as if aware that they're speaking through text. Lancer and Rules know how the inventory system works. Every character in Castletown refers to the player separately from Chris as boss. You might assume that they're talking to Chris at first. I'm pretty sure they're speaking directly to you. It's weird. As I've been saying this whole time, Darkners by nature operate with self-awareness of their position and thus have some degree of meta-knowledge. They abide by the workings of the Dark World as the Light World's more overtly video-gamey counterpart. Now, why does Ralsei know about button prompts? Lancer and Queen reference those too, but I will concede that Lancer could be interpreted as not actually knowing what he's talking about here, and Queen is also talking about the in-universe arcade game buttons. Knowing the controls is largely a Ralsei thing, which isn't surprising given that his every behavior revolves around his role as a guide. This could very well be why he doesn't turn to stone. He belongs wherever we are. He's the Prince of Pure Darkness. This isn't him being contradictory, it's him being the darkest Darkner to ever Darkner.
You heard it here first, Ralsei is black. But honestly, that is a new way of hearing it. So, I've heard before, it's because, Ralsei's fountain is made of pure darkness, whatever that actually is supposed to mean. But the idea that, he doesn't turn to stone because he's supposed to be wherever the player is. That's interesting. I haven't heard anybody else suggest something like that before. Huh. I guess that also could, point into another thing, or I forget where it is, but, there's a point where, if you have the soul icon visible and you have it slightly just over Ralsei, he blushes.
In addition to wanting to serve Lightners, Ralsei is of course dedicated to serving us. And as a fandom, we're kind of uncomfortable with that. I think this is part of why he's the least popular main character. Combined with his uncanny resemblance to Azriel, it makes him seem artificial, it makes his kindness performative and hollow, it makes him complicit in our denial of Chris's autonomy. But I feel that in the end, the game will urge us to sympathize with him despite that. Nobody has chosen who they are in this world, and he's no different. All Darkners are victims of this hierarchy they uphold, including him.
Yeah, specifically, even like, during on the Acid Lake, Rousey says he's learning how to actually be Rousey. He might specifically know that, he looks like Chris's brother, and is trying to, actually grapple with that, trying to figure out, it's like, oh, if I look like his brother, but what does that actually mean for me? I mean, again, like, I had that whole theory that, with Toriel being in Chapter 3, Rousey's going to put the hat back on and go back to the black silhouette just so that Toriel doesn't freak out and see this Darkner that looks almost identical to her son.
He spent years alone prior to meeting the heroes because he is nothing without the prophecy. He presents this unfounded friendliness and flat idealistic view of the world because that's all he knows, and Chapter 1 punishes him for it. But he is learning, he's starting to express himself, he's getting closer to Susie and appreciating that she's her own person, and if seeing his ugly Azriel lookalike face is uncomfortable, good. Not that I think his face sprite is actually ugly on purpose, it's more the Azriel resemblance combined with the shitbait that we're meant to question. The game laying bare the forcedness of his appeal and his lack of a unique identity is necessary for his character arc, not build up to a reveal that it's all a carefully crafted facade. It's not even really conscious enough to be purposefully dishonest.
For what it's worth, maybe he doesn't understand them very well yet. Maybe his view of them is even rather conflated with his view of the player at the moment, but Rousey does seem to like Chris individually. He takes the time to speak to them when we're away about something. His room for them in Castletown is clearly catered to them as a person, and then we have his reaction to their tea. Speaking of tea, how does Chris feel about Rousey, actually? I'm gonna be pedantic about this for a second. So Chris heals 60 HP from Rousey tea, and this is 10 more HP than what Rousey heals from Noelle tea, which people say suggests Chris doesn't like Rousey much more than they would a stranger. But it's worth mentioning that Rousey approves of Noelle. He says her tea is soft and sweet and has unused dialogue speaking positively of her. He seems interested, although perhaps partially for our sake, in her relationship with Susie. I wouldn't call him indifferent to her. Their lack of interactions is because Noelle, who heals 10 HP from his tea and says there's nothing in here, is barely aware of his existence. Chris's reaction to Rousey tea isn't so different from them healing 70 HP from Noelle tea and vice versa for her. And while this is indicative of their strained relationship, we know Chris is special to Noelle and she'd like to rekindle their friendship. So, it's a significant difference, and I wouldn't be surprised if Chris did dislike Rousey considering the circumstances, but 60 HP seems fine in terms.
And honestly, I would think that, the whole thing that Chris could have problems with Rousey being are more aimed at us, where you have the player periodically trying to pair Chris up with, a lookalike of their brother, which can, when you say it out loud, is very creepy on several levels.
In terms of gameplay also, it's not a great healing item, but it's also not entirely useless. I should also add that we've been told that tea will cease to be an item and become rotten tea in future chapters. Aside from the obvious exploit that using Susie tea on Noelle would be, I think this is also necessary because tea can't account that well for how characters' relationships are going to gradually change, and hear me out, the audience should rely on characters' interactions in the story and not a number
items,
to judge how much they like each other.
Don't tell me what to do. I will use numbers any way I want. I've played more than enough, dating games to know that numbers are very sufficient.
To be clear, tea being a Chapter 2 item only was probably always part of the plan. I'm not saying that this was changed due to fandom reactions or anything. All that said, I have a hunch Chris's feelings towards Rousey are a bit more complicated than just dislike or indifference. I have to wonder if perhaps what he says to them when we're away is making them more sympathetic to him than they otherwise would be. Speaking of, is Rousey hiding things from us?
Yeah, that's
kind
a big
of absolutely,
question.
But also not quite. He's certainly hiding things from Susie, but again, I'd overall describe him as more avoidant than actively deceptive. He did not hide the roaring, for one. The legend is quite explicit about the threat of an apocalypse, which is depicted with the same visual in both cutscenes.
Yeah, it was more just it was a lie of omission. You said it was an apocalypse, but didn't specify the apocalypse.
What he did do, however, is neglect to really emphasize the roaring and assume Queen knew about it when not doing that would have solved Chapter 2's entire conflict, which is just a perfect encapsulation of how boxed in his thinking is. Rousey likes to ignore unpleasant things because it's his job to be likable and make the Dark Worlds fun, and he might have also developed some bad coping mechanisms and toxic idealism himself from growing up all alone. So I won't be surprised if he continues to mention important information at the last possible moment, but I will understand that it's a product of what happens when a person with feelings forces themselves into a strict narrative. From his point of view, only the player should be able to make significant choices, but is that really true? I think I and most other people only do fully peaceful and fully violent runs in Deltarune, so it took me a while to find out that if you recruit some but not every Cyberworld Darkner, this is acknowledged through Newbert not coming to Castletown to everyone's despair. Since you have to fight a certain number of each enemy to recruit them, it's possible to leave behind some enemies like pop-ups, not because you beat them up, but because you didn't encounter enough of them. If you haven't attacked anyone but are still missing recruits, Newbert's inferior counterpart Trashy will warn you to check. You're not just encouraged to be peaceful when given the opportunity, but to go out of your way to befriend everyone. Indeed, you get the same ending in the Light World, but violent runs of Deltarune suck. You miss out on the cute friendship sequence and the pretty song, and even though Lancer pardons you, the consequences start being more significant and permanent in Chapter 2. Queen is sad! Newbert is gone! Do you see this empty-ass roller coaster? It looks stupid!
Oh god, I'd never even seen the empty roller coaster before. Oh no.
Not related to Darkners, but Birdley may or may not be paralyzed. King calls you out on leaving people behind, and he's right to do so. Do you really want this guy to be above you? Queen doesn't even adopt Lancer, you guys! At the end of the day, are these pretty minor changes?
Again, talking about, I assumed that the whole thing with, like, Queen adopting Lancer was very much, just one of those things that always happened. I didn't know it was dependent on you doing, like, pure... I didn't realize it was, dependent on having literally every single recruitable enemy.
Yes, maybe. Again, Birdley might be paralyzed, but he's not relevant right now. But it's sad! Imagine how much emptier Castletown will feel the more enemies you fail to recruit. I think it's something Deltarune wants you to think about. If the consequences aren't major for you, shouldn't you still make the right choice? Even if the ending in the Light World is the same, do you still care about the well-being of the Darkners? What does it actually mean for a choice to matter? How many endings are there? 1. Then does that mean nothing I do matters? There's something more important than reaching the end.
The journey along the way.
I don't know if Dark Fountains are going to turn out to be a good or bad thing, because I think, well, the Legends ideas are probably going to be subverted in some way, but then it seems like Rousey is just advocating for escapism in moderation, and it's hard to say that's bad.
No,
I don't know.
Definitely.
What I do know is that Darkners matter. The game is not tricking us into caring about them so it can pull the rug out from under us and say that, well, part of facing reality is disregarding the personhood of these people who very much act real. They're more exaggerated and less grounded than how Lightners are written, but they have lives and feelings and relationships with Darkners from different worlds. I'd previously been pretty confident in the last Thursdayism idea that Dark Worlds don't exist until their fountains are opened and they're—
Wait, last Thursdayism? What? I've never heard of that one before. Last Thursdayism, alternative to last Tuesdayism or last Wednesdayism, is the idea that the universe was created last Thursday, but with the physical appearance of being billions of years old. Under last Thursdayism, fossils, light, already on their way from distant stars, and literally everything, including your memories of the time before last Thursday, were all formed at the time of creation last Thursday in a state such that they appear much older. Okay, honestly, never heard of that one before. And thinking, how does that differentiate from last Tuesdayism and last Wednesdayism? Like, what's the difference between those three?
And their backstories are made up on the spot based on their denizens' history as objects, but that's pretty incompatible with Jevil knowing Queen in Chapter 1 before her fountain was created. I think it's entirely possible that yes, the Knight quote-unquote creates Dark Worlds by infusing their will into them, by opening them up to Lightners, but they also exist in some form prior to that. Darkners are also better understood as representations of objects than literal objects. As Kooky914 points out in his video, Darkners only show up in Castletown if recruited, even though their associated objects are always brought to the closet, thus they can choose to detach. Which brings up the question of what exactly happens to Darkners that aren't recruited, which I don't have an answer for, but I feel is going to be relevant. I'm hesitant to say they just die, they certainly don't act like they're in danger of dying if their fountains are sealed. There's more going on here than we know just yet. Deltarune is dedicated to exploring the horror of what it would be like to be a video game protagonist under an all-powerful being's control. Chapter 1 largely conceals the separation between Chris and the player before slapping us in the face with it at the end, and Chapter 2 further emphasizes the distinction between us and them. The Darkners situation isn't so different. The game, of course, wants us to respect Chris's autonomy, and so it can't simultaneously have us disregard the autonomy of Darkners.
Okay, I thought I was hearing things for a second there. I didn't.
Because they're more fictional than Chris, who, from our point of view, is also a fictional character. If this world is to be free from control, then Darkners have to be able to choose who they are, too. Thank you for watching. I wanted to make this video a more reasonable length this time for my own sake, so I don't think this was an exhaustive list of every Darkner worthy of analysis. I could have done a section on Sham or even Swatch, for instance. Sorry if you were hoping for a task manager segment because of the thumbnail, I just wanted to draw her. But yeah, hope you enjoyed. I may or may not be streaming Deltarune chapters 1 and 2 with my friend, if we have the time before the next chapters are out, so maybe keep an eye out for that, we'll see. Either way, I'm super excited for the next chapters, see you soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be one of those things that we definitely need, like, answers from, you know, the chapters that are coming up. Again, like, it's been asked so many times as to what even are the Darkners, how do they work, how does their history work? Like, I've suggested before that, like, their history is based on, like, how the items they were made of were used and interacted with before the Dark Worlds were formed, and then it's kind of, like, fleshed out as if they were a living being throughout that entire time. But I can definitely see that not working 100% of the time. But yeah, that's definitely going to be it for now. So yeah, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.